Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Hansel and Gretel. By Jacob Grimm and Wilhelm Grimm. Brothers Grimm wrote the folktale Hansel and Gretel. An evil witch who dwells in a candy house kidnaps a brother and sister who had been left alone in the woods. Compassion and generosity are highlighted throughout the story. A poor woodcutter and his beloved wife had two children, a boy and a girl. Hansel and Gretel were the names of the two children. The woodcutter made little money, so they lived in poverty, and when everything grew more expensive, they had no money to buy bread. This led him to tell his wife one night that they would no longer be able to provide for their children. As he lay in bed one night, he moaned and asked his wife, "What will happen to us? We have no food for ourselves, so how can we feed our children?" To his wife's dismay, he flatly refused to hear her suggestion that they simply take the children into the woods and leave them there. When she wouldn't let him rest, he was soon won over. "Oh, you fool," she exclaimed, "then we'll all starve to death. Our coffin boards are all that you can accomplish." And she would not let him rest unless he consented to it. Gretel was terrified when she overheard the children's conversation. Gretel wept and said, "It's over with us." To Hansel. Hansel told Gretel to keep her mouth shut. "Shut up, Gretel. As well as don't worry, I know exactly what I should do." After putting on his coat and snooping around the yard at night, Hansel went into the yard and picked up several white pebbles. When their mother woke them up in the morning, their father led them to the forest where he was going to go gather some wood for the house. In order to avoid going hungry later, she gave each of them a piece of bread and told them it was their lunch. Hansel tucked pebbles into his pockets while Gretel hid the bread beneath her apron before the three of them ventured into the woods. Hansel frequently paused on the way to the house, but his father promptly spotted him and inquired as to why he was doing so. Asked about his white cat, he stated that he was looking at it. "That white cat Hansel has on the roof wants to say goodbye to him." "Oh, father," murmured Hansel. The woman responded by saying, "Your pet is nowhere to be seen. The chimney is reflecting the morning sun." While camping in the woods, their father urged them to gather wood to start a fire and cook over. The wife instructed the children to lie down by the fire while she and their father went to cut more wood once the fire had begun. After they've finished, they'll return to claim their items. Hansel and Gretel made a cozy fireside nook, and as the evening wore on, everyone gathered around to enjoy a meal. In their minds, their father was nearby because of the sound of a chopping axe. When their father hooked a branch from a nearby tree to a dry tree, the wind whipped it around, causing the axe to strike. The youngsters were exhausted from sitting by the fire for a long period of time, so they fell asleep quickly. It was already dark when they awoke. Grieving Gretel was soothed by Hansel, who insisted that they would be able to find their way out of the woods. It was late at night when they eventually awoke. Grieving, Gretel asked, "How will we get out of the woods?" In his soothing words, Hansel said, "Wait till the moon rises, and we'll find the path." When the moon rose, Hansel led his sister out of the woods down a path marked by stones that glistened like silver coins in the moonlight. They walked through the night and knocked on their door at dawn. Upon realizing that it was Hansel and Gretel, the woman screamed at them, claiming she was frightened they wouldn't be back in time. What did she say when she saw Hansel and Gretel knocking on her door? "Why did you sleep for so long in the woods?" she asked. "You didn't want to come back, didn't you?" The father, on the other hand, was overjoyed because it was difficult for him to leave his children in the woods unprotected. When misery and hunger returned, the children overheard their mother telling their father that they only had half of the bread left and that they needed to get rid of the children once more, but this time they should take them further into the woods so they couldn't come back to find out what had happened. The father's heart ached for the children once more. The dad was dejected, and he reasoned that it would be preferable to give the last of the food to the children. She, on the other hand, was averse to the idea of the children remaining in the house. He agreed to it again because she opposed to it the first time. Despite his pleas, the woman remained unyielding in her criticism and scolding. He had to give in a second time because he had already given in the first time by saying A and B. The conversation was overheard by the children, who were all wide awake. Just like the last time, Hansel got up as soon as his parents fell asleep to slip out of the house and gather stones, but this time his mother had barred the door. Hansel reassured Gretel, telling her not to worry and to go to sleep peacefully. The mother woke them up in the morning and gave each of them a smaller slice of bread than the last time she fed them. Hansel threw breadcrumbs on the ground as they made their way into the woods, chopping up a piece of bread in his pocket. His father reprimanded him for taking a step after noticing him again. "I saw a dove on the roof of the home," Hansel said. In the forest, The woman and her children made a fire and told the children they were going to cut wood for a second time. For now, they can take a nap if it's too much for them to bear. Eventually, after an entire day had passed, Gretel gave her brother some of her bread because he had spent his own on the way. They were exhausted and went to bed soon after. Nobody arrived to take up the youngsters at night. Hansel comforted Gretel as she started crying again. "Let me wait till the moon rises so I can see the crumbs of bread that I dispersed, and they'll help us find our way back." When the moon reappeared, the two of them returned to their apartment in search of crumbs, but they were unsuccessful. All of them were devoured by the birds. Once again, Hansel was there to console and support his younger sibling. There was no way out of the forest even after they trekked all night. Blackberries and strawberries they found in the woods were all they could eat. So they sat down on the ground and dozed off. Third morning, they set out to search for a path back to civilization, but they kept getting lost in the woods. They spotted a white bird perched on a tree, hopping and singing. That's how much they enjoyed seeing her soar through the trees, hopping between branches as she made her way into the woods. She landed on the roof of a house soon after. They would perish if help did not arrive quickly. They happened to notice a small, snow-white bird on a bough about noon. They paused to listen to it because it sounded so good. Then it flew in front of them, stretching its wings as it did so. There was a small home at the end of the trail they were following. This little house was fashioned completely of bread with cake for a roof and crystal clear sugar for windows, and when they got closer, they could see the bird sitting on the roof. With a cake roof and sugar windows, it appeared to be a house built out of bread. Hansel was ecstatic that they were finally allowed to eat after so long of a wait. Hansel and Gretel began taking some from the ceiling and the delicious window, respectively. They heard a faint voice from the home telling them not to consume the house as they were about to break off a piece of the roof with their hands. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" The children refused to be accommodated and instead responded to the voice they heard. The wind, the heavenly child. After then, they kept gnawing at the house's exterior. Gretel, on the other hand, shattered the window frame, sat on the ground, and proceeded to eat after Hansel decided to bite the roof. Suddenly, an elderly woman emerged from the house, and the terrified children threw their possessions to the ground in fright. They were met by an elderly woman who inquired as to how they had arrived. Inviting them into her home, she grabbed both of their hands and brought them into the building together. Among the food on the table were apples, walnuts, cakes, milk, and other delicacies. He and she went to sleep feeling as though they were floating in space. They were rapidly snoozing. It turned out to be an evil witch who had generously welcomed them into her home and escorted them into the woods when they were lost. In order to entice children, she built the house out of cake and candy. A child she caught would be strangled, cooked, and devoured by her. The witch had red eyes that made it impossible for her to see in the distance, but she had a great sense of smell, like woodland animals that know when someone is near. She determined immediately that she would not allow the two children to flee. Hansel and Gretel approached her and she grinned wickedly, saying, "Now I have them. It is impossible for them to get away from me." The witch arose early in the morning and approached the children's beds as they slept. In the morning, when she saw them sleeping peacefully, she imagined that they would be two tasty morsels. She snatched Hansel by the hand and dragged him into a small stall, where she chained him to the cage door so no one could hear him scream for aid. Afterward, the witch returned to Gretel, shook her awake, and ordered her to bring water and make food for her brother to acquire weight. "Time to get your asses in gear, you slacker. Obtain some water and prepare something tasty for your sibling. He'll be fattened up while he is outside in the stall. I plan to eat him when he becomes fat." Gretel began to weep, but to no avail. She had no choice but to follow the evil witch's orders. Hansel was served just crayfish shells, while Gretel was served the best. Every morning, the witch made her way to Hansel's stall to check on his weight gain. "Hansel, please extend your index finger so that I may check your weight." The witch mistook Hansel's little bone for his finger since she couldn't see it very clearly. The fact that he hadn't gained any weight baffled her. The witch was getting impatient and decided to act after only 4 weeks. It didn't matter if Hansel was skinny or not, she was going to cook him no matter what. Grieving, Gretel was unable to do anything but listen to the witch and bring water to her stricken sister. As she pleaded with God, "Dear God, please help us. There was a time when if only the wild creatures had eaten us in the woods, we would have died together." When she kept on whimpering and nothing worked, the witch chastised her. Gretel had to get up early the following morning to hang the kettle and start the fire. As soon as the witch finished preparing and kneading the dough, she informed her that she was going to start baking the bread right away. Gretel was thrown into the oven by the witch, who instructed her to see if it was hot enough to bake bread. Gretel resolved to fool the old witch after realizing she could shove her into the oven. She requested the old witch to show her since she feigned she didn't know how to get into the oven to check the temperature. The elderly woman took a picture and then decided to show her. She shoved her head into the oven, Gretel pushed her harder, and the witch burst further inside because the entrance was large enough for her. While the witch shouted and howled, Gretel slammed the oven door shut. While the witch was engulfed in flames, Gretel fled to locate Hansel. Upon reaching the stall, she freed Hansel and informed him that they were free of charge. "Hansel, we're out of here. We have buried the old witch." Because they had nothing to be scared of, brother and sister sprang for delight. The intruders broke into her home and immediately began peeping into every crevice. A cache of priceless gems was discovered, so they took them home with them. As they made their way home, Gretel stuffed her apron with pearls and other costly stones. They were eager to escape the enchanted forest. A mile and a half into their journey, they came upon a river. As there was no bridge, boat, or walkway in sight, they had no idea how to get across. A white duckling appeared, and Gretel decided to approach it for assistance. Little ducklings, Gretel and Hansel are standing in the front. It's neither a path nor a bridge, but take us up on your white back, please. Hansel approached the coast with the ducklings and requested her to carry them over the water. Gretel declined his offer to ride on the back of a duckling since it was too heavy for her. Gretel replied, "No," to this. "The duckling would be unable to bear the weight of that. If it's working, it should allow us to cross one section at a time." They were both rescued by a sweet little duckling. They bid the duckling farewell before making their journey back home. To them, the forest felt familiar after a while of walking, and as they walked on, their father's house began to appear in the distance. To get there as quickly as possible, they increased their speed. They ran as fast as they could to their father when they spotted him and gripped him tightly around the neck. When the father saw his children, he embraced them with all his might. During their absence, their mother died, and now they could finally be together. Both Hansel and Gretel pulled off their clothes and began to remove their aprons to reveal their pockets, which were filled with jewels from the witch's house. That was the end of all of their issues. Their father was a wonderful parent to the children. They no longer had anything to worry about, and they were able to enjoy their newfound freedom together. My saga comes to an end here. There's been a dash. And whomever manages to catch it will be able to fashion a massive fur hat for themselves out of it. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.